Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. My name is Gretchen Neisler. I'm the Vice Provost for International Affairs, and I lead the Center for Global Engagement here at the University of Tennessee. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's program, U.S. and Japan, Allies in Security, Partners in Economic Prosperity. The Center for Global Engagement is honored to co-host this event with the National Security and Foreign Affairs Center at the Howard Baker School of Public Policy and Public Affairs and the Tennessee World Affairs Council. This is the second installment in this important series following a successful session yesterday and apparently a successful drive from Nashville, where our distinguished panel met with business and government leaders from Middle Tennessee. We are grateful to continue this conversation here in Knoxville and at the University of Tennessee, where our international engagement and global collaboration are central to our mission as the state's flagship and public institution. Today's topic, U.S.-Japan relations in both security and economic contexts, could not be more timely or more relevant. From defense cooperation and technology sharing to trade, investment, and education, the U.S.-Japan alliance is one of the most consequential bilateral relationships in the world. And here in Tennessee, we feel the impact of that relationship every day. Which brings me to something we are incredibly excited to share with you. The University of Tennessee will launch a major new initiative that we are deeply humbled and proud to lead, the University of Tennessee Japan Center. The UT Japan Center will strengthen transdisciplinary research, professional development, and public engagement in Japan studies and U.S.-Japan relations. It builds on Tennessee's unique position as home to Japan's second largest foreign investment presence in the United States. With over 200 Japanese companies contributing more than $22 billion to the state's economy and employing more than 63,000 Tennesseans. This is a strategic and deeply meaningful investment, not just in our university, but in our state and region. It reflects Tennessee's vital role in the global economy and UT's capacity to serve as a hub for meaningful international collaboration. The Japan Center has strong institutional foundation here at UT, and we already have over 30 faculty and staff across 16 units engaged in Japan-related research. Our Japanese study program is thriving with nearly 70 majors and minors and more than 500 annual course enrollments, including study abroad opportunities. These efforts are now coming together under one cohesive initiative that will serve not only our students and researchers, but also the broader community and partners across the state. This center would not exist without the vision, persistence, and leadership of three remarkable faculty and staff members. Dr. Noriko Horiguchi, professor in the Department of World Languages and Cultures, who will serve as the center's inaugural director. Dr. Rachel Ray, Director of Global Research, Innovation, and Partnerships in the Center for Global Engagement, and Dr. Krista Wiegand, Professor and Director of the National Security and Foreign Affairs Center here at the Baker School, and also today's moderator. Their years of commitment have laid the groundwork for what we believe will become a national model for academic and strategic engagement with Japan. And now, it is my honor to introduce someone who has been a tireless champion of U.S.-Japan relations, not only across the Southeast, but here in Tennessee. His Excellency Consul General Shinji Watanabe has served as the Consul General of Japan in Nashville since April of 2024. His diplomatic career has included postings in Denver, mountains, but not as good as the Smokies, and at the Japanese Embassy in Sweden. In his current role, he is focused on strengthening U.S.-Japan ties across the five-state jurisdiction of Arkansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee. His work encompasses economic development, cultural exchange, and support for Japanese residents and companies. I had the pleasure of joining Consul General Watanabe in Tokyo just last month at the Southeastern U.S. Japan Association annual meeting. It was abundantly clear then, as it is today, that he is a steadfast advocate for Japanese engagement in Tennessee and a true friend to the University of Tennessee. We are deeply grateful for our long-standing partnerships with Japanese universities, businesses, and government, and of course, with the Consulate General of Japan. Please join me in welcoming Consul General Watanabe.
Thank you, Gretchen, for your kind introduction and dedicated efforts to advance Japan-Tennessee relations. Good afternoon. I'm Shinji Watanabe, Consul General of Japan in Nashville. As Gretchen said, I've been in Nashville 1.5 years, but I got surprised to see many cold days in the south. Actually, I spent many winters in Stockholm, Sweden, so I'm used to cold and dark winters. But still, it's very cold here. But however, at least the people are still warm. That's good. Well, it's a great honor to join you today in this prestigious forum. Let me begin by offering my heartfelt congratulations to the University of Tennessee Knoxville on the forthcoming Japan Center, which will officially launch in the fall of 2026 and bring together a Japanese studies program from across the university. I wish the Japan Center great success in creating new opportunities for academic collaboration and cultural exchanges between Japan and Tennessee. Well, as you know, last month Japan made history with the appointment of Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, our nation's very first female Prime Minister. Just a week after she took office, Prime Minister Takaichi hosted a summit meeting with President Donald Trump in Japan. It was President Trump's first official visit to Japan in his second term, and he became the very first foreign leader received by the new prime minister. Through that visit, Japan sent a clear message that Japan-US alliance is stronger than ever, and it continues to contribute not only to the peace and prosperity of both our nations, but also to the stability of the region and the international community. During their meeting, the two leaders built strong personal bonds and trust. They discussed the key issues ranging from national security and economic cooperation to global challenges that go far beyond the bilateral or regional level. The two leaders reaffirmed their shared commitment to work closely together to advance a free and open Indo-Pacific through the Japan-US alliance and in partnership with like-minded countries. On security, two leaders concurred to further strengthen cooperation to enhance the deterrence and response capabilities of our nation. Given the most severe and complex security environment since the end of World War II, Prime Minister Takaichi expressed her determination to further strengthen Japan's defense capability and increase defense spending as its own initiative. On the economic front, the two leaders signed a document reaffirming their continued efforts on tariffs and economic growth. They also agreed to deepen cooperation on economic security across a range of areas, including critical minerals, rare earth, and key technologies such as AI and shipbuilding. As you may know, Japan has been the largest foreign direct investor in the United States for the past 6 years. More than 9,000 Japanese companies operate across the country, supporting about 1 million American jobs. As Gretchen mentioned, right here in Tennessee, we have a shining example of that partnership. Over 200 Japanese companies are active in the state, employing around 60,000 people. Over the past year, I've had the privilege of seeing firsthand the tremendous efforts made at every level, from elected officials and local communities, to make these successes possible. A particular notable example is Denso in Maryville. For 35 years, Denso has grown alongside the local community, making significant contribution to the regional economy. Another great example is Canadavia, which converts industrial waste into energy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, working together with the US and Japanese companies across Tennessee and the neighboring states. A couple weeks ago, I also had the honor of attending the Southeast US-Japan annual joint meeting in Tokyo. Since 1976, business and government leaders from Japan, the 7 southeastern states, including Tennessee, have gathered alternately in both countries every year. We come together to discuss important business themes and strengthen our partnership. This year's business focus was the new space economy, a truly exciting frontier. Participants shared lessons from past public-private sector cooperation and explored new opportunities for future collaboration. Over 440 participants joined this year, and Tennessee sent its largest delegation ever, about 70 representatives led by Governor Bill Lee. Next year, the conference will be held in Nashville, and I'm sure it will be another great success. Of course, people-to-people exchanges are also a cornerstone of Japan-US relations. Here in Tennessee, cultural events like Nashville Cherry Blossom Festival and the Knox Asian Festival, led by Kumi Alderman, who is attending here, Executive Director of the Asian Cultural Center of Tennessee, play an important role in building bridges between our communities. Sister city relationships also help connect our peoples and deepen mutual understanding. These include partnership between Knoxville and Muroran, Athens and Isahaya, as well as other exchanges with Chattanooga, Oak Ridge, McMinnville, Smyrna, Hendersonville, and Nashville. In closing, I want to express my sincere appreciation to everyone who has worked so hard to strengthen Japan-Tennessee and Japan-United States relationship. Your dedication continues to build a future of peace and prosperity and opportunity. I look forward to working with you all to deepen our ties in business, culture, and education. And last but not least, I'd like to thank Dr. Tosh Minohara and Dr. William Cho for joining us today. I'm very much looking forward to their insightful panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Consul General Watanabe. We're very happy to have you here as our honored guest. Welcome all of you to University of Tennessee, to this co-hosted event. I want to mention, some of you may not be familiar with the fact that Senator Howard Baker, who is the namesake of the Baker School of Public Policy, was also ambassador to Japan. That was his last post and service, public service to the United States. He was posted there from 2001 to 2005. He's a very good friend of Japan. Even before he was ambassador, he traveled for many years to Japan and helped to grow the relationship that is so important today with not only the state of Tennessee, but the United States. So we're very honored to have him as a namesake and to help us celebrate U.S.-Japan relations and continue to promote that relationship. This weekend, tomorrow, is his 100th it would be his 100th birthday. And so we are celebrating, this panel is part of a series celebrating, in this case, Ambassador Baker to Japan. So wanted to mention that. And I do have a short note before I introduce our speakers from a Japanese friend of Baker's, Ambassador Baker, when he was in Japan. And he sent a message. He couldn't come all the way from Japan, but he wanted to say, today, as a Japanese citizen, I want the students of the Baker School to know how much we learned from Senator Ambassador Baker. He believed that democracy meant dialogue, that alliances required trust, and that leadership was about humility and listening. He was a statesman in the truest sense, one who brought people together not with force, but with decency. And we still believe that to this day, and we promote that to this day. And U.S.-Japanese relations are stronger than ever, and we hope to continue that. So today I'm very pleased to introduce two honored guests. I'll tell you a little bit about them, and then we'll open up. I'm going to ask them some questions, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end as well. So first, let me introduce Dr. Toshimi Nahara on your far right. He's a professor of international relations and security studies at the Graduate School of Law and Politics at Kobe University in Japan, where he holds a joint appointment with the Graduate School of International Cooperation Studies. He received his bachelor's degree in international relations from University of California, Davis, and his PhD in political and diplomatic history from Kobe University. He's the founder and chairman of the Cabinet Office certified nonprofit RIPA, the Research Institute of Indo-Pacific Affairs. He's also a senior advisor to, is it KREAB? CREAB, thank you, Japan, and the National Security Group of the Global Tekejuku Kansai Association of Corporate Executives. He was formerly an external advisor to the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and lecturer at both the Japan Maritime and Air Self-Defense Forces Command and Staff Colleges. And he has served 3 tours on the Japan Maritime Defense Force Training Squadron as an academic observer and lecturer. He's the author of many books and articles, most recently The Handbook of Japan's Foreign and Domestic Policies during the Decade of Abe. His academic achievements have been recognized as a recipient of both the Shimizu Hiroshi Prize and the Japan Academic Research Award. Let me next introduce Dr. William Chu, is a senior fellow and deputy director of Hudson Institute's Japan chair. His work at Hudson focuses on U.S.-Japan Indo-Pacific relations with an emphasis on economic security, trade and investment, and regional partnerships. Recent projects include the Nippon Steel-U.S. Steel Partnership, critical mineral supply chains, trilateral U.S.-Japan European Union economic security cooperation, and U.S.-Japan energy partnerships with Southeast Asia. Dr. Chu writes and speaks regularly on policy issues, with his writing and analysis appearing in many prestigious publications, including Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Politico, Washington Post, Nikkei, the New York Times, and the Financial Times. He holds a bachelor's in history from Yale University and a PhD in history from The Ohio State University, with, I know that's important, with a dissertation on Cold War U.S.-Japan commercial and diplomatic relations. He's a former fellow at the Smithsonian, at the Clements Center at the other UT, University of Texas, Austin, and the University of Tokyo. He got his start as a research assistant at the Institute for Defense Analysis during the Iraq War. He's a native of New Yorker, and most interestingly, I think, he's also a former Jeopardy champion. So please welcome our distinguished guests. Yes. All right. So, Dr. Minohara, I will start with you. We have a new prime minister in Japan, female prime minister, still LDP. Tell us what should we expect? What's different? What's the same? What's the status of things in Japan?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you and people at this university for the kind, warm welcome. It's my first time here in Knoxville, and I like what I see.
Is your microphone on?
It should be on.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry. Okay.
Good.
So again, thank you again. I'm looking forward to sort of strolling about and seeing your campus. But thank you for the excellent question about Prime Minister Takaichi. As the Consul General mentioned, she is the first Japanese female leader, and I think many Japanese, especially women, are very proud of this fact. Japan has beaten the United States to it, so the United States remains the only G7 power without a female leader at this point. What I'd like to really impress upon you is that I do not really know how she's been portrayed in the media here in the United States, but in Japan, she is seen as somebody on the far right. And granted, some of her comments in the past have leaned that way, but as Prime Minister, you can see that she has really shifted. She is very pragmatic, and I would say that she's a realist. First of all, she has not gone to Yasukuni. Remember, Prime Minister Abe did this once, and he learned that there are blowbacks, and I think she has learned from this. She also supports very strong relations with, of course, Taiwan, but also South Korea. And I think this is a big thing because a lot of people were worried that if she were to become prime minister, that relations with Korea will deteriorate, and this has not happened. And of course, she is a graduate of Kobe University. I teach at Kobe University. This is not why I'm saying good things about her. I got to really admit, a lot of my colleagues at Kobe University, it's the academia, tend to be on the left, and so they have harsh words about her. But I don't see it this way. And I think her relationship with President Trump, that first summit, was excellent compared to Prime Minister Ishiba. I've met Ishiba 6 or 7 times, and Prime Minister Takaichi, I have not had the honor to meet her yet, but from what I see on TV, she has lots of energy. On the George Washington, she was jumping up and down, and you don't really see Ishiba-san doing that. And to me, her smile, or her mannerism, seems very genuine. And so I think it really gives a fresh face to Japan. So I'm really optimistic. I'm hoping that she will sort of move Japan's security identity to one that's based more on realism. You already sort of see that because she said just the other day that Japan will recognize a Taiwan contingency as a national survival threat. This means that Japan will act along with the United States to defend Taiwan. Japan in the past has been very ambiguous about this, but she was very clear. Of course, she got a lot of flack from China. So I'm from Kobe. The next city, the city adjacent to Kobe is Osaka. There's a Wolf Warrior Consul General representing China, and he said we should lop off her dirty neck. And this has created lots of problems between China and Japan. We'll sort of have to see where this leads to. But again, I think Japan is under the helm of solid leadership. So thank you, Krista, for an excellent question.
Any thoughts on the new prime minister, Will?
Yeah. Sorry, let me fire this up. Yeah, I think agree with everything that Tosh said. I think the new prime minister has a lot of potential, right? I think she sees things holistically, right? She sees the interconnection between economics and security, and also her own party's need for popular leadership. Certainly, I think these are challenging times for her political party. Until she was elected, their party lost the past 2 or 3 sort of elections, essentially over a popular protest vote over things that everyone can relate to. I think here, right? Cost of living issues, quality of life issues. And so she realizes that she needs to regain the popular support of Japanese folks for her party. And you do that through delivering economic benefits to everyone. And she's made economics a primary priority for her. But at the same time, she also realizes that Japan also faces a lot of external challenges from without. And this concern over security and economic security, it's actually harmonized, right? And I think it's most evident through I think what China has done in the past 2 months ago, essentially cutting off rare earth materials and also legacy semiconductors for Japan's automotive industry. Things that the same reasons why we're all sort of like paying more for cars now is partly because of this Chinese attempt to use their stranglehold over supply chains to raise prices on ordinary Americans and ordinary Japanese. And so she understands that this challenge that she faces both economic growth as well as security, is best resolved by cooperating closely with the United States through the $550 billion investment fund that they agreed to back in September, but also through what they call running faster, right? So innovating more effectively, right? Putting more money into R&D, encouraging Japanese companies to expand their capacity to invest and to produce, both in Japan as well as in the United States. And long term, this allows for both countries to be better prepared to withstand these kind of unfair, non-market attempts to sort of seize control and do economic coercion that China is so fond of doing. And so I think she is someone who is definitely very solid policy-wise. She's demonstrated close chemistry with President Trump, which will be really important for her. And so I think we're all looking forward to seeing what she'll accomplish. But I think the initial signs have been very positive.
Great. And so I'd like to follow up with on that, Will, about, you mentioned this $550 billion investment that was negotiated. And, Japan's economy hasn't been great the last few years relative to the U.S. I mean, the U.S. economy has been not so great either, but relatively it's stronger. The dollar is stronger. So what is the state of economic relations? Tell us about this deal. Is this good for Japan, U.S.? I mean, is it good for Japan and the U.S.? We know it's good for the U.S., but what does Japan get out of it?
Sure. Well, Krista, thank you so much for asking that question. So at Hudson Institute, we're a think tank, foreign policy think tank in Washington, D.C. I focus on U.S.-Japan relations, and I just organized a conference on Friday that talks about the $550 billion. And I'll qualify, it's not an investment fund. It is a loan fund. All right, investment fund gives the connotation that Japan is giving us the money and we're not going to return it back. That is not true. It is a loan fund. They are lending us the money, and we will pay it back, plus 10% above that. And so if you frame it in that terms, it's an opportunity for Japan to essentially, look, the reason why Japan is the largest foreign direct investor in the United States is because there are challenges within the Japanese economy, Japanese demographics, right? Long term, the Japanese market is not a high growth one, right? Because of challenging demographic situations that I think everyone here is very familiar with. So the United States is the most attractive, developed market that still has a lot of high growth potential. And so that's why Japanese companies have invested over $890 billion in the United States. That's the main purpose. And so what this loan fund does, this $550 billion, is allow both the U.S. and Japan to invest in key sectors that, one, lower their dependency on Chinese control over certain key critical sectors. Two, run faster in key areas like AI, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, right? To ensure that in the future, as we compete in terms of innovation and economic growth, these are the key sectors that we have to invest in. And so through this fund, we can both invest and enjoy the fruits of these efforts. And so that is, I think, the ultimate aim of this $550 billion, which is to reduce our dependencies on hostile actors while also enabling us to run faster and innovate to ensure that we can have the a safe and prosperous international system that I think we've all benefited from.
Great, thank you. Tosh, let's talk about, take a step back and talk about, overall the state of, the current relationship. What are the big issues? I mean, we know economics is obviously a new issue, but let's talk about what are the big issues?
Sure, okay. So, I'm here at the Baker Center. Howard Baker, Ambassador Baker is ambassador to Japan from 2001 to 2005, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
Let me tell you, the world has changed in the 2 decades since. And we have the rise, of course, China, but we also have a nuclear North Korea, and we have a Russia that is invading a European country. And this is the largest war since World War II in Europe. So things are pretty crazy. And therefore, in order to react to this reality, I think the U.S.-Japan relations is really maturing at a different level, maturing as not only strategic partners, but also security partners. And for the first time, you see In hindsight, these changes are really drastic, but since they sort of take place in small steps, you don't realize it as you go along how drastic these changes are. But the Japanese military is now becoming a full-fledged fighting force. But they need to change their banner. They're no longer the self-defense forces in my mind. They're actually a full-fledged military, but they're working much more closer, much more integrated with their American counterparts. And you see this on multiple levels. There are lots of offices of U.S.-Japan alliance management done by those in the Jietai. This is the JSDF, the Japanese military. This is something that I don't think would have happened 10 years ago. So these are the positive aspects. I think issue-wise, I would personally say that because Japan is changing its security identity, so does the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty. Is it still a situation where the United States is obligated to defend Japan, but Japan doesn't have to defend the United States? I think this has to change. If it's a mature relationship, it should go both ways. Another big issue is, of course, the economic aspect, and this would be the tariffs. In 2019, under the first term of President Trump, the U.S.-Japan Economic Agreement was signed. So there was supposed to be no tariffs, no punitive tariffs. Right now, Japan has a 15% tariff placed on it. So these are things that I think are issues that, as mature partners, I think there should be more sense of trust, credibility, and also, to treat each other with respect. And the recent policies towards American allies by the current administration, I just think that, who benefits from this? And obviously, I would say it's China, as China is now saying that it is a free trade, a nation that supports free trade. So I think there are areas in which there can be more improvement. But from the security aspect, it's been a sea change. So I'd like to leave it at that.
Yeah, when I taught a program for the State Department last year in northern Japan at Hokkaido University, Tohoku University, and I was teaching Japanese students, and we took them to SDF bases. They had never been to these places, and they would not use the word military. It was just so foreign to them. But that's changing, obviously, and that we talked a lot about that. But I think that that's going to be an ongoing discussion. That's not the case here, of course. We've been a military for a long time, but it's certainly an interesting issue. You mentioned, Tosh, the tariffs, of course, and the Trump administration is in its second term now, and the tariffs are higher this time. What are in your view, what's the Japanese public perception of U.S. policy?
That's a very important question. I really like to emphasize this, is that it may seem that the United States is, this America First policy that you're gaining in the short term. But I think from the mid to long term, things are not so good. And the reason why I say this is when I deal with my students, and this is not just Kobe University, I also teach at other universities, the view toward the United States has declined tremendously. There's doubts if the United States if we trust the United States, because the United States has never acted in this manner. It was always the pitcher and the catcher relationship, tremendous trust. Now, Japan's not sure if America will really support Japan in times of dire need. So, and I really worry about this. Because I'm part of the Global Tekijuku, the Corporate Association of Executives, I talk to businessmen, and their view of the United States has really changed. Not on the person-to-person level. They love America, they love Americans, but when it comes to current policy, they're like, wow, this is not the America that we know. So what I think, in a nutshell, is that American moral leadership is eroding, and this is a problem. And when you have the younger generation of Japanese doubting the United States, again, who benefits? So this is where I'm really worried. Being in Japan, this change in how the United States is viewed is worrisome.
Well, on that same note, what is your impression of the public perceptions, especially about the the tariffs and the trade deals of the Japanese. What are you hearing from Japan? Yes, sir. Yes, Will.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I think, I think in the tariffs, I think what I also talk to Japanese businesses quite often, especially when I'm over in Tokyo. I think they view the tariffs as, certainly I think they find it challenging. I think they sort of see it as, but I think what they want to do is essentially, look, for businesses, what you need is stability, right? You need the ability to plan. You need to be able to anticipate your costs. What they are, so I think in terms of, they're happy that the trade deal was done because at least it provides some level of stability in terms of things that they can project for, right? So if it's a 15% tariff or a specialized tariff in, say, semiconductors or pharmaceuticals, they can at least plan for that. Where they're finding challenges is that, I think they definitely resonate with the administration when the administration has expressed support for increased foreign investment in the United States, right? It's very clear part of the Trump administration's desire to revitalize American industry and also to push for American technological leadership. That will take more foreign investment. But the challenge that they're encountering is that, and they keep raising this with us, is that one, there are two major challenges that they face. One is that the workforce is just not there, right? We need more people to do all sorts of work, right? Not just like, high-end ed, like lab coat type stuff, but also just like regular technicians to build out our semiconductor infrastructure and industry. And so this is something that is a huge challenge for this. And this is an opportunity really for universities like UT to be at the center of all of this, because increasingly you're seeing a lot of foreign investment taking place in areas that are very close to college campuses, right, which are real centers of innovation. Right, so I obviously applaud all the stuff that you guys are doing here at UT, and I think that makes you guys highly attractive for foreign investment. But one, workforce is an issue, and I think the president, in his comments to Laura Ingraham a few days ago, has expressed some acknowledgement of how we have to address these needs for more foreign investment with providing the workforces to sustain them. The other challenge is that the administration has made it very clear that as part of this investment effort, that they will support them through, facilitated energy access, regulatory expedition, access to federal land and water, and these are all great things, right? This is the administration giving its political backing to these projects. The challenge is that a lot of these projects are taking place in states with either excessively stringent regulatory standards that basically create a dislocation between what the federal government is trying to do and what the state level government or regulatory system is allowing. And so that creates this problem that, frankly, Japanese companies have told us repeatedly, this is something that we hope that the administration can work with us on. And so I think these are ongoing issues that I think the Japanese are facing in terms of tariffs as well as trade. But the fortunate thing is that through a lot of their investments and also through this new fund that they've set up, they have direct line to the administration through the consultation committee as part of the investment fund. And the hope is that, long term, the admin will understand their perspectives and work to address them, which I think if you look at what the admin has done in this past year, they have demonstrated an ability to adapt and accommodate the needs of partner governments as well as partner businesses, especially in terms of if you look at the issue of automotive export credits in terms of lowering Japanese tariffs on automobiles. So I think there's still a lot to be done. I think it's something that we'll continue to monitor closely.
We hear a lot about the demographics in Japan, and how serious of a cliff is that of a problem for Japan? Yeah, either of you.
Sure. I think so. Demographically, I think this is certainly a big challenge for Japan, right? And I think Japan's replacement rate is about 1.3, I believe. But at the same time, so I think Japan has been the first one to experience this demographic decline. But at the same time, if you really think about it, and look, there are certainly a lot of economic and demographic headwinds for Japan. I'm not going to pretend that that's not the case. At the same time, though, if you look at it, Japan has confronted this issue for, 3-4 decades now? Whereas China, I think their replacement rate is about 1.0 right now. And South Korea is about 0.68. I mean, that's really concerning. And so that's a case where Japan has been living with this challenge, and it's been trying to adapt its efforts, right? So a lot of the Japanese investments in robotics is actually a reaction to this looming demographic challenge and the need for continued economic production and economic innovation. I think what you're seeing is that, I think Japan has a longer glide path towards addressing these needs, whereas other nations around the world, like China, like South Korea, will have a much more precipitous challenge that we will see how they will handle. I think China has been very proactive in that regard. I think I just saw a $40,000 bounty for people in one of the Chinese cities to have a kid. We'll see if that works. But I think Japan has demographic challenges, but it's also trying to address them through its policies on mobility, on robotics, on planned cities, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Tosh, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm going to be more blunt. I think the challenges, the demographic challenges are very, very serious. Japan needs to act drastically. I mean, there's plans to like give women like a couple $100 to support having children. But I'm like, just because you get a couple $100 from the government, you're not going to say, oh, let's go for the third and fourth and fifth child. It doesn't work that way. I have two of my own, and they were very expensive. And so, I mean, what do you do? And I think it's immigration policy. I mean, robotics is fine, but as far as I know, robots don't pay taxes, and they don't pay into the national pension, and they don't go to colleges either. And so this is a very serious problem. But it's the I word in Japan. It's very, very risky for politicians to say that Japan needs to have a robust immigration policy. But I think Japan is a mature democracy, and if your population is shrinking, you got to do this. And you got to start early, because Korea started to loosen up its immigration policy, and it's not really working very smoothly. But I think Japan has, the draw is amazing. It's an amazing society to live in, safe, clean, reliable. So I think a lot of people from the world will consider wanting to live in Japan. For example, I have my high school buddy. He lives in Idaho, and blonde hair, blue eyes. He's like, you know what? I think I want to retire in Japan. And I was talking to him last night. And he's saying, but I checked your visa policies, and it's very hard for me to live in Japan forever. And I'm like, that can't be true. It's like, no, I did my research. So things like that have to change. And I think it's magnificent when you're a country in which people want to live and become citizens. And I think the major challenge, I've been in Japan for a quarter century now, is I think Japan needs to start thinking about creating a new type of Japanese. You don't have to look Japanese to be Japanese. All right? I look Japanese, but I'm not Japanese, which, it causes sorts of problems in Japan too. But anyways, yeah. I mean, what's wrong with, that's the beautiful thing about America. You could be of any color. It doesn't matter. And you're still an American. And I think this is where Japan can really learn a new form, a new type of Japanese. You can be blonde, blue eyes, and still be Japanese. And I think that'd be really, really an ideal society.
Yeah, sounds nice. I wish Japan luck, and we also have our own issues too here, of course. Tosh, let's talk about the alliance, because this is, rising. We mentioned rising China. We talked about the strong economic relationship, and you mentioned Russia, you mentioned North Korea, China, of course. Seems like a pretty serious time for not only Japan, because it has borders, or is near all of these countries, water borders at least, but the U.S. also has shared national security interests in these risks and threats as well. So what is the state of the alliance? What can Japan do to help bolster that alliance? What can the U.S. do? Where are we with that?
Okay, again, another really important and relevant question to what's going on now in the Indo-Pacific. The U.S.-Japan alliance acts as the first and foremost defense of China's expansion. And when you look at Chinese foreign policy goals, it is to weaken the alliance. So we want to do the opposite. We want to make sure that this alliance is bolstered. And how can Japan do this? Well, I think Japan is taking the necessary steps to strengthen the alliance by increasing its defense expenditure. At one point, Japan's expenditures were below 1%, and now that will be doubled soon. Hopefully, it will go beyond this. But it's not just that. It's the fact that the Japanese military and the U.S. military are working much closer together. And they're really, you can sense this togetherness. There's high level of trust between the general officers. I say this because I have friends who are generals in the U.S. military and also the Japanese side, and they really trust and respect each other. But one thing that I think is lacking on the Japan side is to inform the public of these changes, the mindset. This is because the reason why I started REPA, my nonprofit think tank, was because I don't really foresee a future in which peace will last for an eternity. I actually am afraid of a major war breaking out within the next less than a decade. But the Japanese people aren't aware of this. They believe that peace is something, it's like air, it's always there. You don't need to work for it. And that's not true. But I cannot teach this in my classroom because, I'm sitting on your far right, but in Japan they think I am on the far right. They think I'm this crazy professor because I work very closely with the military. There's that stigma. And if I were to bring a uniformed officer into my classroom, boy, it'd be crazy. I did it once, and it was really bad. And therefore, I took it out of the classroom. And so now I educate my students outside of the classroom. This has to change. The world is changing. Japan needs to grasp the realities and the importance of national security. Now, what can the U.S. do? I think one is to not just say to Japan, spend more, buy more, but really look at the entire package. Just take a step back, a more holistic approach, and say, hey, Japan, what can we do to work together? And one could be, for example, why not the United States invite Japan to AUKUS? That's the UK-Australia alliance. There's two pillars. One is the nuclear submarines. The other is developing and producing high technology. Stuff like that. Engage Japan on multiple fronts. Also nudge Japan to work closer with its like-minded partners in the area. Of course, North Korea and Taiwan. And so I think, and also the Philippines. So, I think we're beyond the age where it's U.S.-Japan. U.S.-Japan should be at the core, but it should also really factor in the U.S.-Korea alliance, the United States relationship with Taiwan, and also the Philippines. So sort of expand this, make it into a more larger plane is, I think, what needs to be done.
Well, your thoughts, last thoughts?
Sure, yeah. I totally agree with Tosh in terms of the issue over essentially the Japanese public's view towards security policy, right? So I first went to Japan about 13 years ago, and I still remember having arguments with my host father, who was extremely well educated, but definitely on the left. And we used to have arguments over the Article 9 clause in the Constitution, where he would interpret anything that even touched on the military as militarism, right? I'm like, yeah, Japan's been like a democracy for 70 years now. Now, I'm not worried that the self-defense force guys are necessarily going to start military coups and knocking over the prime minister. Like, I think we're pretty safe these days. But, for him, born right after World War II, he still had the mindset of anything that's touching on the military means militarism and warmongering, and we cannot have that. And I think, Ukraine has changed the Japanese mindset on this, but it still needs a lot more work, right? And this relates to this other thing about essentially, look, if we are going to get into conflict in the near future, which I hope it doesn't happen, but if it does happen, what has happened in Ukraine suggests that the future war is actually going to be a long war, right? The Ukraine war has been going on for 3.5 years now. They're still going at it. Part of it is because Russia's being supported by China with necessary materials. But, let's just ignore that part, right? This is a very material, resource-heavy kind of conflict. So where I'm concerned about is really more about Japan's own defense industrial base, as well as the American defense industrial base, and its ability to sustain this long-lasting war. Right now, if we were to get into, theoretically, a conflict with a near-peer competitor in the Western Pacific, we would, the number of missiles we would probably shoot in the first 2 weeks would completely clean out the entire American and Japanese stocks in Japan right now. Now, so you need to have to come up with a solution with, okay, if this conflict is going to last for 2 years or more, or whatever, theoretically, right? Again, please do not get me into trouble. But if this were to be a long war, how do we sustain this conflict and ensure that we have the materials to deal with it? This is the biggest challenge that I think we face in terms of U.S.-Japan defense cooperation. It's about defense industrial capacity. It's about working smarter to produce things quicker, to put designs into production quicker, and to increase capacity both in the U.S. and Japan to produce stuff that we will need should the worst case scenario happen. That's one of the biggest challenges that we face, right? I think the admin and the previous Biden administration has done good steps in that direction, right? And through the Defense Industrial Cooperation DICAS system. I forgot the full acronym, but this is clearly an area where we need to do more. There's been a lot of positive news on shipbuilding, on maintenance and repair of American naval ships. That's great, but we have to think in terms of the next conflict may not just be 2 weeks; it may be 2 years or more. So that's one. The other thing is operational cooperation. I think we're doing more cooperation in terms of training exercises. I think General
Nicholson.
Just ditched us so he could get ready for Keen Edge out in the Pacific. Right, that's the U.S.-Japan military exercise. That's going to be happening in a few weeks. But and these are all great things, right? But we still don't have the ability to actually communicate effectively on the same level because of security clearance issues, on information security issues. That's a major concern. And in terms of, if you're talking about South Korea, I think South Korea-Japan cooperation is great. Right now, they only have an agreement to share information on essentially North Korea, missile launches, but they don't even have a shared policy on who gets to shoot down the missiles if it crosses into South Korean territory or Japanese territory. They still don't know who gets to shoot down the missiles. And obviously, this is a case where you don't want to waste missiles by shooting 2 or 3 or 4 on the same target, right? You definitely want to conserve your missiles. So these are all opportunities where we need to have greater operational cooperation. The Japanese have made good progress recently with the creation of the new Joint Operations Center headquarters in Tokyo that will talk directly to the former U.S.-Japan U.S. Forces Japan, but the level of operational cooperation that we need there's still a lot of ways to go. So I think these are the areas where, in addition to obviously spending more, but just building out more capacity to produce more stuff, and then also being able to coordinate in times of crisis.
If you want to wrap up, last point from Tosh, and then I'll open it for questions.
So I just want to be frank. I said earlier that Japan's military is changing to become a more full-fledged military, but it's very hard to change the basic the DNA of your institution. And what I'm referring to is that the Japanese military, by domestic law, is not a military. Their status is a special public servant, and so this is a problem. If you're not respected in society as a military, again, people do not really wear their uniforms in public. The Jeitai itself is not really respected as a profession. And what do you do if there's a major war, and dad or mom, what's your instinct? To protect your own family. But if you are a professional military officer, you have your duty to your country. So you leave your family behind. You don't want to, but this is your duty. And you go fight for the country. But if you're a special public servant, you're torn. You're like, well, the society has never treated me as a professional military. I want to stay with my family. And I think this is a big issue. And the reason why I'm raising this, just the other day, I was having dinners with Japanese generals, and they're telling me, they're like, Tosh, what's happening is that these young officers who are selected into the command and staff college, this is 15 years, so they're usually lieutenant colonel majors, lieutenant colonels, mostly lieutenant colonels, 15 plus years. They're resigning. And I'm like, well, these guys are assured a career in the military. And I'm like, yup, but they still quit. And I'm like, why? Is it because the private sector is paying more? And they're like, nope. It's because we all sense that war is approaching very quickly, and they're afraid because they're not professional military. So this is a very serious issue. The Jieitai needs to change and become the national defense force, and this is very difficult to do. I'm hoping that some Japanese leader will, expend the political capital necessary to make this change. It's very important.
We have time for a few questions, so please raise your hand. And yes, if you could speak clearly.
Could you tell me what the expansion of the defense budget, could you tell me the implications that'll have on the Sino-Japanese relationship?
Oh, it won't be positive, but what's happening is the Chinese are playing the game where security-wise, they're acting very aggressively. I mean, now they have the third aircraft carrier, and they're building their fourth. They're training out in the Pacific now. They're challenging Japan, Japanese islands of Senkakus. They actually just flew a helicopter over these islands, and these are Japanese sovereign territory. On the other hand, the Chinese are saying, we believe in free trade. We're not like the Americans. And they're trying to link up, couple with Japan economically. Now, the Chinese are very shrewd, and they're sort of decoupling with the United States because the United States is no longer considered to be reliable. But they're offsetting that by linking up with American allies. And so when you go to Japan, and, it's full of Chinese tourists, but it's not, and they're buying up property. It's just this economic leverage that China now has over Japan is enormous. And this, again, is a problem. You depend on the United States for security, but you depend on Chinese for your economic prosperity. And that's kind of difficult to balance, especially when, if they go loggerheads. So, yeah, that's one thing I see.
So I'll just chime in that I think, so obviously, look, if Japan were to, Japan's already spending or they will spend 2% by March 2026. Expectations that it'll go beyond that. How much more? That's still open to question. That said, look, China's going to complain no matter what, right? China's full of professional complainers. They're going to complain no matter what, because what they are trying to do is constantly. So they realize that the U.S. is a challenger. They're constantly trying to probe for weaknesses in the American alliances, right? So I'll give you an example, right? After the President Biden, President Yoon, and then also Prime Minister Kishida of Japan concluded the Camp David Agreement on the trilateral cooperation back in 23, China immediately lodged a complaint over the treated Fukushima water from the nuclear plant, which they already demonstrated that the IAEA itself tested that it's actually cleaner, it's less radioactive than the surrounding seawater, right? So they had it already certified, it's fine. But China lodged a complaint saying that this water is unclean. You cannot, and as a result, they cannot buy Japanese fish, even as Chinese fishing boats were fishing in Japanese waters for this, right? So China's, that's what they do. And they were purposely advertising this information in South Korea about how unsafe Japanese seafood is because of this Fukushima treated water situation. This is what China does. They constantly probe and they try to find weaknesses in the alliance system, and they're trying to create rhetoric, right? So in this case, they will say, Japan is a warmonger, and oh my God, they're thinking about maybe getting a nuclear submarine, AKA they're going to build nukes. Hey, Korea, you should be concerned. They'll say things like that, but it's just the standard Chinese deck of just. This is a Chinese playbook, right? So, and I think a lot of this reaction, the hostility to what Prime Minister Takaichi said about Taiwan in terms of hey, look, if China does do something in Taiwan, we may have to get involved. That's not that controversial. It's been acknowledged since 2015, de facto. And so, but China's trying to make a mountain out of molehill because they are always seeking ways to probe and weaken American alliances with its close partners in East Asia. So you have to start interpreting their actions not at face value, but in terms of what is really the agenda. So.
Yeah, I think in the back there.
Hello there. So it seems to me that war with China is in no one's best interest, and I'm curious if you guys could talk a little bit about the importance of deterring an invasion of Taiwan and also helping me understand what the U.S.-Japan interest in Taiwan is. Is it preserving democracy? Is it deterrence? Is it advanced semiconductors? Just help me understand that a little bit.
I'm gonna. Can I answer that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Please.
So, from a perspective of geopolitics, I mean, losing Taiwan for Japan is a tremendous loss because now Okinawa becomes the forefront of Chinese expansion. But I've participated in several Taiwan contingency simulations, and one of my takeaways is that, and this is really interesting, the United States can afford to go back to Guam. But for Japan, there is no way they can accept the loss of Taiwan. And I think deterrence is done through strength, and Japan needs the United States. It's the U.S.-Japan alliance that serves as the strongest deterrence, that if China makes the move, it will be very, very painful, and therefore don't even think about it. I'd like to add something. This is something I believe very strongly. When you go to the westernmost island of Kyushu, during World War II, this is where a lot of the kamikaze pilots took off. There are two bases. One is Kanoya Navy, Chiran, former Imperial Army. And you go and you see all these kamikaze pilots, and these were young pilots, and these weren't crazy suicide. They fought for a nation. And there are a lot of Taiwanese. And so Japan possessed Taiwan for half a century. And so Japan may not have any legal obligations to defend Taiwan, but I believe strongly that there is a moral obligation to defend Taiwan because the Taiwanese did the same for Japan. Many Taiwanese died for wars that Japan had fought as Japanese Taiwanese. So you can't say, hey, history counts for a lot. So you can't disregard that. That's my personal opinion.
So I'll suggest in terms of the Japanese interest in Taiwan, right, and this is actually an American interest as well. Taiwan is essentially part of what they call the first island chain. I think if you've done anything on IR in East Asia, you've heard of that term, right? But I'll just point this out to you: 70% of the world's global trade, in terms of value, passes through the Southeast Asia, through the Straits of Malacca, right, and so on and so forth. Lose Taiwan, like basically China controls all the sea lanes that Japan is completely dependent on, right? Unless they only want to focus on trade with the United States, which is not viable, right? I mean, they need other sources of trade as well. They get 30% of their LNG from the Persian Gulf. And so these are all considerations for Japan where it is actually an existential threat for the Japanese. What I'll say is, forgot, what was the other part of your question? I forgot.
I hear a lot that the U.S. interest is different things. It's defending democracy. It's
Yeah. Well, yeah. But I mean, the loss of Taiwan would be a blow to sort of this idea of the rules-based order that is based on economic rules, diplomatic rules, and the source of peace and prosperity in the whole region, right? I mean, it's through this framework that has been responsible for East Asia and Southeast Asia's economic rise in the past 50 years. And losing Taiwan would basically destroy that system, right? And so it's not just, it's a geopolitical consideration, it's an economic consideration. It doesn't seem to make sense for China to want to do that, but China only respects power. And Xi Jinping is a one-man government in Beijing, right? His priority is to, if he can, if there's an opportunity to do so, to supposedly to reunite Taiwan with the mainland. And so with that in mind, it's not really about pure calculations of is this worth it or is it economically worth it? It's more of almost an emotional power-based judgment in his mind. And so I agree with you. It would be horrible for everyone involved if there were war over Taiwan. But that's not the key consideration.
But Will said something very important, rules-based order. This is why we cannot allow Ukraine to fall. We cannot create a precedent where status of quo can be changed through force. I mean, if Russia succeeds in absorbing Ukraine, what message does that send to China? And so that's why I think you cannot be detached from what's happening in Ukraine.
We are over time, but if anyone needs to go, you may go leave. But if you're able to stay, we can, if it's okay to address a few more questions. Is that all right?
My flight's at 7.
Okay. So yes, in the back there, please.
Yes, Article 9's in your Constitution for a reason, and I guess historically, since the 40s, there's been sensitivity on, I guess, creating a military presence again. How would you characterize the change that you've seen over the last 10 or so years in the military, domestically and within the region, and what do you think the strategy is for the expansion of Japanese military within the Southeast Asia?
I'll take a quick stab at that one, right? So I think in terms of the engagement with Southeast Asia, I think Japan has been very proactive in engaging with Southeast Asia, and it's on a multi-dimensional approach, right? It's obviously economic investment. Everyone keeps talking about Chinese investment in Southeast Asia. If you actually look at it, Japan and Korea combined actually invest more in Southeast Asia, right? China doesn't really invest; they give loans, very destructive loans to Southeast Asia, right? So that's one. But there's also been a lot of investment in terms of energy. The Japanese are vital to the energy infrastructure of Southeast Asia, which is growing, and their energy needs are growing 4% every year, right? So this is a massively growing, vibrant region of the world that needs a lot of energy, and Japan is able to bring it, market it, help ship it, and all from the United States, right? From the Gulf of America to possibly maybe Alaska at some point. And so that's sort of the interconnection. In terms of military cooperation, I think the Japanese are well aware that if China somehow gets control of the sea lanes in the South China Sea, and certainly in the Taiwan Straits, Japan will be in a very extremely difficult situation. And so they've been doing a lot of partnership with the Philippines in terms of one, sending them Coast Guard Coast Guard ships, where the Chinese are constantly using to ram their boats in the various sort of lagoons, right? But they're also they're shipping air defense and also surface radars. They're sending them destroyer escorts, right? So they're deepening their cooperation with the Philippines, and I think back in September they just signed a reciprocal access agreement, which essentially allows them to train more effectively, which is basically part of the long-term Japanese strategy of building engagement with Southeast Asia, with those countries that are willing to not just sit on the fence, but to take a proactive approach towards safeguarding their own interests in the region. So Japan has been very proactive in Southeast Asia. Every time I go to Tokyo, that's all they sort of really focus on. And so I think they're leading the way. I think it's up to us to sort of find effective ways to work with them and figure out our priorities so we can figure out what's the best way to work with them. I think technically they call it military transfers, right? So it's ships that Japan no longer uses that they're transferring to the Philippines. Those Coast Guard ships, they're not military; they are Coast Guard, so they are transfers. Radars are non-lethal, so they are transfers. But long term, I think the Japanese have to figure out their defense export policy in a way that is much more conducive. Because frankly, the best way to ensure a stronger defense industrial base and a stronger defense budget is to actually export. Yeah. And that ensures a certain demand signal that ensures that your factories actually have enough orders to sustain them, given the ebb and flow of your own government's orders. So that's the plan. But those are also challenges that they're currently grappling with. There's personnel in terms of like cooperation and training, right? Certainly on these, destroyer escorts, they're going to need to cooperate with the Filipinos on training them on the systems. But yeah, it's more about just like building these partnerships with them, getting them trained up on the same systems and cooperation and so on and so forth.
The key term is called OSA, Official Security Assistance. Japan now provides aid when it comes to the area of security. So, as Will mentioned, radars to the Philippines, ships to Malaysia, and now the most recent is drones to several Southeast Asian nations. A little side note is that Australia has recently agreed to purchase Japanese frigates. They're called the FFM Mogami class. They're stealth ships. And now New Zealand has shown an interest in buying Japanese warships. This is a massive change. I was speaking to an Australian liaison officer the other day, and he was saying, you know what's going to happen is that once war breaks out with China, and they're actually thinking at this level, it'll probably be difficult to repair these ships in Japanese home waters. Japan will send these ships to Australia. Since Australia will have the same ships, we'll swap. The Japanese crew can jump on our boats, and then they could return to the battlefield. And I thought, wow, you guys are thinking at that level. The joke is that, so the Prime Minister of Australia has said that the ships will be imported as is. Only thing that will change is that the Japanese language will be changed to English. And the liaison officer was saying, I don't really believe it. I think we're gonna take out the bathtubs. The Japanese sailors soak in bath, Japanese tradition. So he says, you know what? I want you to take a picture of the bathtubs so I can tell my superior officers, leave the bathtubs there. So we'll see what happens.
Quick question or quick comment?
All I can say is that in terms of military gear, one of the key issues is standards, right? You want to get them all on the same standards in terms of like locking them into an ecosystem where they're using the same gear. One, it allows you to have better effective operational cooperation, but two, you avoid the India problem, which is part of the reason why India has still been really wishy-washy on Russia is because they're so dependent on Russian standard gear, and they're unable to get off of that, and so they've been unwilling to fully ditch the Russians because they know that they're going to need the Russian gear should anything with China ever break out.
The key term is interoperability.
Yes.
And this is very important.
Yeah.
That the same side has the same gears.
Yes. So last question from former U.S. Ambassador to Australia, A.B. Kohlhaas. You have the floor.
Sorry,
So he's here.
I wasn't going to ask a question, but I spent 2 years trying to unsuccessfully convince the Australians to join with the U.S. Navy in freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea. And a lot of what you've been talking about here leads me to question, do you think the Japanese would be inclined to join with the freedom of navigation operation with the U.S. Navy, which means sailing through waters claimed by the Chinese in places like Mischief, Seoul, the Parcels, all the hot spots of the South China Sea.
Good question.
Well, yeah, thank you for an excellent question. Well, China is a country that weaponizes tourists and also students. So the moment Japan does that, Japan's going to suffer. And so I think Japan is being very, very cautious. Look, there's something that happened in 2011. Most people don't know about this. When Japan was the East Japan earthquake, it was a massive earthquake. Tsunami was awful. You know what the Chinese did? They tested Japan's defenses. They actually sent warships to Japan. But all the Japanese major supply ships were dealing with this disaster, so they actually had to send a training squadron out there to tell the Chinese that we were watching, and we'll do things necessary to defend our waters. But I mean, that's China. When a nation is suffering a massive natural disaster, they send their troops. They move their ships. So yeah, I think it shows you what kind of country we're dealing with. So I think Japan is being very cautious. Don't really want to upset the Chinese in a manner that will be detrimental to Japanese economic prosperity. But if I were Prime Minister, I'd say, hey man, send the ships.
Well, I mean, so far with the phone ops, I mean, you've primarily been seeing American ships, but also European ships, right? Countries that.
The Brits a couple of times.
Right. I mean, Right. The Chinese still don't have that reach, right, to really directly, buzz the tower in the Tower of London, right? But so the Asians are sort of staying out of it. That said, I mean, look, I think actions speak louder than phone ops. Japan's transfer of radars and destroyer escorts to the Philippines are as effective, if not more effective, than phone ops. And so I think, look, with China, they're, like I said, they're professional complainers. You pick and choose your battles. I don't think anyone doubts Japan's willingness to support the freedom of navigation in the South China Sea.
Yeah, and I think, on that, to wrap up, I think, Japan is the closest and the most supportive of U.S. national security interests in the region. So even if it's not willing to do phone ops, it's still willing to do almost everything else, I think. So please join me in thanking our distinguished guests. And Danielle, if you could put the QR code. If you're interested in, we have no further events, unfortunately, because it's November. We have other events at the Baker School, and next week is the Center for Global Engagement is hosting International Week. So go to the UT calendar, and there'll be lots of other international events. But if you are interested in next semester learning about our events or hearing, you can just take a photo of that, and that will link you to our website where you can learn more information about our center. So thank you so much for coming, and have a great afternoon. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Let me turn this off.